The respiratory system moves air through the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and bronchus to the alveoli where the gas exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. Nares are the openings to the nose. The nasal cavity is lined with cilia, mucous membranes, and blood capillaries. The air is filtered by cilia, moistened by mucous membranes, and warmed by the blood. Air moves into the pharynx or throat, the common passageway for food and air. Air continues on to the larynx. The epiglottis, a flap of tissue in front of the larynx, closes off the larynx when swallowing to prevent food from entering. The larynx or voice box contains the vocal folds. The trachea or windpipe connects the larynx to the bronchial tree. The cartilage rings of the trachea prevent the trachea from collapsing. Lungs are spongy tissue with alveoli and blood capillaries. Breathing occurs because of the expansion and contraction of the lungs. The bronchi carrying the air subdivide into smaller branches called bronchioles. At the end of each bronchiole are the alveolar sacs. The alveolar sacs are surrounded by blood capillaries and contain millions of single-layer alveoli cells where the gas exchange takes place. Oxygenated air goes from the nose to the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, and alveoli. By the process of diffusion, oxygen in the air moves from the alveoli to the capillaries. Carbon dioxide moves from the capillaries to the alveoli and is exhaled. This process is called respiration.
Of breathing. In humans, the main organs responsible for respiration are present in the thoracic cavity. In the thorax region, the rib cage and a dome-shaped fibrous tissue known as the diaphragm are observed. Present within the rib cage are the pleural membranes, which enclose the lungs. The right lung is divided into 3 lobes: the right superior, right middle, and the right inferior lobe. The left lung is smaller and has only 2 lobes: the left superior and the left inferior lobe. Both the lungs are associated externally with small tubular bronchi which unite and extend into the trachea. The trachea has incomplete C-shaped rings of cartilage which prevent the tracheal wall from collapsing. The trachea leads into the pharynx, which is connected to the nostrils. As we breathe in air, the oxygen molecules enter the nostrils and travel downwards through the pharynx and trachea to finally reach the bronchi. From each bronchus, oxygen travels into the lungs. Within the lungs, the bronchus divides repeatedly to form bronchioles. Oxygen travels through these bronchioles and reaches the alveoli, each of which is surrounded by a network of capillaries. A section of one alveolus shows the presence of numerous alveolar chambers with pores. Blood containing RBCs is seen flowing through the capillaries. The oxygen molecules from the alveolus diffuse into the capillary and then get absorbed by the bluish-purple RBCs. This causes oxygenation of the RBCs, and a transition in their color from bluish-purple to red is observed. The blood moving into the alveolus contains RBCs and carbon dioxide molecules. These molecules are released into the alveolus. The carbon dioxide collects in the alveolar chamber. And then from the alveolus, it travels through the bronchioles into the bronchus, which finally reaches the trachea and is breathed out through the nostrils. So the process of breathing in air rich in oxygen is called inhalation. After the contraction of muscular diaphragm, the lungs expand and the air rushes in, resulting in the inflation of alveoli. During exhalation, the diaphragm moves up and the lungs contract. Thus, the alveoli deflate causing the air to be forced out. This exhaled air is rich in carbon dioxide. This process of inhalation and exhalation is known as respiration.
So often in brackets you will see plus energy written at the end of the equation as well. However, there is a second type of respiration called anaerobic respiration. And anaerobic respiration means without oxygen. So in anaerobic respiration we're going to lose the oxygen from the beginning of the equation. So we start off with just glucose, and this time it's not reacting with oxygen, so it makes different products. This time glucose makes lactic acid. Also with anaerobic respiration you will also have energy released, which we can write in brackets at the end. This specifically is anaerobic respiration in animals. So in animals, glucose is broken down into lactic acid. However, there are some problems with anaerobic respiration. Firstly, the build-up of lactic acid causes cramp. Also, anaerobic respiration releases much less energy than aerobic respiration. So we don't want to be doing anaerobic respiration if we can help it. Breathing in oxygen and using that for respiration in our cells is going to release much more energy. So most of the time animals want to use aerobic respiration, but when they have to, when there's a lack of oxygen, when you're not getting enough oxygen into your lungs, your body will need to use anaerobic respiration. Oxygen debt is something that can occur after vigorous exercise. Oxygen debt is the amount of oxygen you need to breathe in to break down the lactic acid into carbon dioxide and water. As we said before, lactic acid can cause...
Plants get their oxygen from the air through the stomata. Do you remember how photosynthesis works? Compare these two equations. You can hopefully see that aerobic respiration works in the opposite way to photosynthesis. Plants produce their food by photosynthesis and then through respiration release energy from it. But don't be confused. Whilst plants do release oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis, they don't necessarily take in this oxygen for respiration. They just take in any oxygen from the air. Plants respire throughout the day and night, as do animals, but they only photosynthesize during the day, when there is light available. So this is how aerobic, or with air, respiration works. You just need to remember that glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen to release carbon dioxide, water, and energy. In the next video, we will have a look at anaerobic respiration, aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic means with air, and so needs oxygen, whereas anaerobic respiration doesn't need oxygen. Let's start by looking at aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration releases energy in cells by breaking down food substances whilst in the presence of oxygen. It is represented by this simplified equation. But don't forget the energy which is released. Glucose is broken down by oxygen to release the byproducts of carbon dioxide and water. Energy is released, which is then used to make a special energy molecule called ATP. ATP is how energy is stored for later use by the body. Aerobic respiration happens all the time in all cells, usually in the mitochondria. Animals get the oxygen needed from the air through their ventilation systems. Plants get their oxygen from
flower leaf with incandescent light of different colors. Similar stoma openings occurred with equal energy outputs, indicating that heat was the driver of the behavior. The experiment was replicated with 5 other plant species. Scientists had assumed that the guard cells forming the pore have sophisticated sensory and information processing systems that adjust the pores. But this research demonstrates that the rate of water loss by stomata is linked to physical processes deep within the leaf. This means that the current model for what drives stomata to alter their size has to be revised.
To facilitate cutaneous respiration, the skin of the earthworm is moist and slimy due to the secretion of mucus. During breathing, oxygen diffuses across the body surface and enters blood capillaries that lie just below the skin. Blood carries the oxygen to the body cells. There, in return, it picks up carbon dioxide and transports it to the skin capillaries, from where it diffuses out of the body. Unlike earthworm, insects like cockroaches have a hard and impervious exoskeleton. They do not have single respiratory organ. Instead, the respiratory system of insects like cockroach consists of small, branched cuticle-lined air ducts called tracheae. These tracheae form the tracheal system in the body that carries oxygen from air to all the parts of an insect's body and allows the diffusion of gases into the tissues. The air enters the trachea by specialized opening present in the exoskeleton. These openings are called spiracles. These spiracles can be opened or closed by valves. Spiracles and tracheae constitute the respiratory system of cockroaches. During the process of respiration, the oxygen-rich air rushes into the tracheal tubes through the spiracles. These tracheae are further branched into small tracheoles. The tracheoles are the series of tubes that transport gases throughout the body. Oxygen diffuses into the body tissues from the tracheoles and finally gets absorbed by all the cells of the body. And in return, carbon dioxide that is produced as a byproduct from the cells is released by the cells of the body. The carbon dioxide from the tissues diffuses into the tracheal tubes and finally goes out through the spine.
Through the mouth, and it's flowing over the gills. So if you take a fish out of the water, there's no water flowing over the gills.
So they don't open?
They can't take the oxygen out of the air, they only take the oxygen out of the water.
Wow.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
You will be amazed to learn that in how many ways frogs respire or breathe. 4 ways that respiration occurs in the frog. Frogs have an amphibious mode of life. Frogs show different modes of respiration. Gill respiration. At the stage of tadpole, such type of respiration takes place through gills. The gills have blood vessels that absorb oxygen through diffusion. Then oxygen combines with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Respiration through skin. The respiration which takes place through the skin is known as cutaneous respiration. It usually takes place in frogs when the metabolism level of frogs becomes low and the demand for oxygen is less. It raises in water and during states of inactivity and hibernation states. Through blood capillaries where the oxygen combines with hemoglobin, skin absorbs that oxygen which is dissolved in water. It is then transported to the body's different parts and releases energy. When the skin is extremely dehydrated, the cutaneous respiration is no more possible. Therefore, the frog will be dead due to lack of oxygen, a condition called asphyxia. Respiration through mouth. Scientifically known as buccopharyngeal respiration, since it involves both the buccal cavity and pharynx. This type of respiration comes to pass through the buccopharyngeal cavity. In simple words, that respiration that occurs through the mouth is known as buccopharyngeal respiration. The buccal cavity comprises mucous membrane and is highly rich with blood capillaries. Thus, it takes in the oxygen during the diffusion process.